Welcome. Thank you for joining me for episode 3 of the ISWUTT podcast. I'll say what's up to that. For those of you where this is your first time joining us, my name is Michael Graham, and I will be your podcast host this evening. For those of you who are returning, thank you for listening to episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1, we had a conversation about some things that were going on in China, across the world. Episode 2, we did a very brief cover of what was up and coming at Comic-Con. My experiences there, really a little bit of a history behind what Comic-Con was and how it became to be in San Diego. Keep an eye out this weekend because I do want to do a brief follow-up of some of the things that I saw at Comic-Con. I had a great time watching, learning, seeing some stuff that's upcoming. So keep an eye out for a short little clip episode. I'm going to do some discussions about some of the panels I saw, things I liked, I didn't like, should be good. But this week, episode 3, I actually had a couple different requests. One from my roommate and my sister. For some reason, they both decided to ask me to record something about sharks, and I thought that would be really fun. For one, I've been interested in sharks. Interested is not necessarily quite the right word. I would say I have a very healthy respect for what sharks are. Being in the ocean, being one of the highest end predators. But I would also say that I have a pretty deeply instilled fear of sharks. So I was racking my brain thinking about sharks, and it's actually kind of a tough subject, I think, because oftentimes if you're going to do anything regarding sharks, it's very visual. So how can we take something that is in audio format only and make it slightly interesting? So as I was thinking about what to discuss and what to cover this week while talking about sharks, we have a Shark Week is upcoming on the Discovery Channel at the beginning of August. So it's that time of year. It's the time people are going out, going to the ocean. Even though COVID is happening, the oceans are more popular than ever because that's the one place where you can kind of distance. I guess if you're swimming in the ocean, you're not necessarily right next to someone unless it's a packed beach. So it's that time of year. And in order for me to get some topics of things that I wanted to discuss, I was racking my brain and I couldn't really come up with anything that would make for a fun episode. So naturally, I decided to rewatch one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time, and that's Jaws, Steven Spielberg's Jaws. I initially had seen Jaws when I was very young, probably 5 or 6 years old. And I think with the rest of us, I guess most people that have seen that movie, it frightened the living daylights out of me. Very true. I think for years and years, not only was I scared to go in the pool by myself, I was scared to go really in any water where I couldn't touch the floor because I was nervous and scared of what might be lurking under me. So I think it was a piece of that. Probably didn't help so much that my sister would constantly, my loving sister, shall I say, would constantly warn me about sharks in the pool. So I didn't like being in the water that I couldn't see. I remember specifically one time when I shared this story with my sister. She doesn't remember this, of course. But my dad and sister played a prank. We had a pool in our backyard as a kid. And there's the deep end. And they said, "Oh, Michael, you left your goggles in the pool." This is nighttime when we're all coming out of the pool. The light is still on. And I said, "Oh, yeah, no problem. I just got out of the water. Let me hop in, and I'll just go grab the goggles from the deep end." So I get up on kind of like the rocks where it's higher up and it's a little jump into the water. And as I'm midair, my dad shuts the light off. So the water was completely dark and you couldn't see anything. That's probably the fastest anybody has ever seen me swim to get out of the pool because I was so terrified of what was there. I couldn't see anything. At least when the water is clear, you can look around and see there's no sharks. When you can't see anything, you have no idea. It's the fear of the unknown, the fear of the deep. But Jaws really was what started me with that. So I rewatched it this weekend, and there were a couple things that stood out. One I actually picked up, was very interesting, is one of the only known predators of great white sharks is the killer whale, the orca. And conveniently enough, the boat that they actually take, spoiler alert on Jaws if you haven't seen it, movie from 1975, the boat that they take out to go hunt the giant 30-foot, 25-foot great white shark is actually named Orca. I never really got that until I just rewatched it. It was the first time I've seen that movie in probably about a decade. But I had such a blast watching it. The score was fantastic. When you listen to the music that's playing when they're actually on this hunt, which they're going into a life or death situation with this massive fish that clearly has the thirst for blood, for human flesh. It kills multiple people, and they say, let's hop on this rickety boat with this mad sea captain, Quint, let's go kill the shark. But the music that they play sounds like just a bunch of kids going on an adventure in the woods. Fantastic movie. And there were a couple things that stuck out for me in that. One is when they're actually on the boat, there's a scene where they're kind of under and they're drinking, having a really good time. They sing, show me the way to go home, boom, 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 tired and I want to go to bed. And then Quint starts talking, gets a little serious about the U.S.S. Indianapolis, one of the greatest stories of shark attacks ever in U.S. history. So I want to cover that a little bit. I think that would be good to get into. Hopefully it'll be informational. It'll pique your interest. The next thing is Jaws itself was very loosely based on a set of shark attacks that happened in the early 1900s. I want to say it was 1916 off the coast of New Jersey. I think those shark attacks, it was in a matter of 12 days or so, 4 or 5 people. I think 5 people who were attacked, 4 were killed. And there's some things about what happened there that are interesting because we don't necessarily know if it was the same shark that had attacked these people, if it was a different shark, what had really gone on. So I would like to cover that a little bit. And then once we're done, we can go ahead and we can throw out some pretty fun facts about the 3 most likely sharks to attack a human. You have the great white shark, you have the bull shark, and the tiger shark. And the reason I was thinking about that is there's a really good scene in Jaws where they think they have the shark that killed a little boy off the coast. It was a big tiger shark, and they kind of gut it, and they pull out all cans and fish. And I think there's a license plate from like Louisiana, Alabama. And they say the shark's been south and it swam north. And I want to cover some facts about those sharks. I think that would be really fun. But once again, it's a little bit difficult because we don't have the visual aid. When you see these sharks, you want to see how big they are in comparison to a swimmer, to a boat. You want to see them in action. So I'll do the best that I can to cover this. And while I'm going and I'm talking about everything, feel free to look this up. The U.S.S. Indianapolis is a fantastic story. What happened off the coast of New Jersey in the early 1900s, very intriguing. So stay tuned. We'll be back shortly, and we're going to dive right into it. Very good. I'll say what's up to that. All right, welcome back. So, as I had mentioned, we really kind of want to dive into one of the things in the movie Jaws that was one of the more intense scenes when all 3 of the guys that are on the boat trying to hunt this massive shark are below the deck and they're having some drinks. You can tell maybe 1 or 2 too many. And they go back and forth and they're kind of comparing different scars that they have and they're telling the stories behind them. It's one of the most fun scenes because you can see them letting loose a little bit. But of course, in the movie Jaws, you have the almost deranged sea captain by the name of Quint, and he turns everything really dark very quickly. While they're comparing scars, he starts to mention that he got one of his bigger scars when he was a seaman, a crew member upon a boat called the U.S.S. Indianapolis. The U.S.S. Indianapolis was a very interesting vessel because during World War II, even though it initially took its first trip, its first flight in the early 1930s, 1931, the USS Indianapolis was one of the boats to take one of these very top secret missions and actually go from Hawaii to an island called Tinian Island, which is right off of the coast of Guam. And then off of the coast of Guam, it had this enriched uranium that was used to create a bomb called the Little Boy, which was one of the nuclear bombs that we had dropped on Hiroshima in Japan. So at the time in this top secret mission, it was actually carrying roughly half of the world's enriched uranium that they needed to set off this nuclear warhead on Japan, effectively ending World War II. So knowing that it got there, dropped off all of the goods, and then ended up going back to Tinian Island. Once again, it's right off of the coast of one of the islands off of Guam. Once it was off the coast of Guam, they decided, okay, great, we're going to have one journey from Guam over to the Philippines. So while it's on its way to the Philippines, the U.S.S. Indianapolis actually got shot by a Japanese submarine. So it got hit by two different torpedoes. So the very first torpedo tore a hole in the side of this hull that's 60, 70 feet long. While it's going full bore in the ocean to get to where it's going, massive hole gets ripped. And then the second torpedo that hit all of the gas. It hit pretty much anything that was explosive on board. And some people were even saying that the fireball that was created by that torpedo created a fireball that went 200, 300 feet potentially up in the air. So now you have this massive hole ripped into the side of the hull of this ship, of this battleship that is in the U.S. fleet. It only took 12 minutes from that initial impact to the ship to be torn in two and sinking completely. So on board, they had 1,200 crewmen. And out of that 1,200, only 900 actually initially survived and made it into the ocean. But this is just the beginning. So those are the events that led up to the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. So this is in 1945. After this boat had gone down, it was expected in the Philippines. And what's really interesting about this is there are different people that are expecting this boat to come in, and nobody called SOS. Nobody alerted anybody. We're missing a giant boat that's supposed to be here. What is going on? So they said that there were a few different people that should have been sending out SOS and going to look, but nobody at any point decided to react. So what they said was that the three distress signals that were actually received, of the three commanders, one of them was too drunk to act on it. The other one just ordered his men and said, you know what, don't disturb me. This is my downtime. I don't want to hear about it. And the other one, who actually listened to his men, was just assuming that this was a trap from the Japanese to get out in the open ocean so then they could sink their battleship, right? So because of that, nobody went to the aid of the USS Indianapolis as it was going down. I know that 12 minutes is a very short period of time, and that's not enough for anybody to get to where they were, but at least you can start to scramble people to get out there to save these men. So you have now 900 people floating in the water with a battleship that went down in 12 minutes, completely torn into two pieces. This is where the 5 days starts. So the actual initial bombing happened around midnight. You have 900 people that get off the boat. Not all of them are completely okay. You would imagine after some explosions happen, there's going to be people in the water that are going to be bloodied. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be dead bodies in the water. Middle of the night. So what happened with all of these people that were on board that were manning this battleship, they took what life preservers they could find, and they would group up into groups of people. Some estimated the groups were 5, 10 people. Some said they were in groups of 30. Some even said our group had 100, 150 people. And they're all just floating there. The amount of food that they could get before the boat went down, very, very slim, almost nothing. The amount of fresh water, same thing, nothing. So here they go for 5 days, bobbing and floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean between Guam and the Philippines. Warm water, Pacific Ocean. What do you think about when you think about the wide open Pacific Ocean? Think sharks. So, reported the very first shark spotted was as the sun was coming up on the very next morning. So this is day one. So as these crewmen are huddled up in these groups, just bobbing, they notice more and more sharks start to show up. And fortunately, they thought, well, there are plenty of people that are in the water that are severely injured or dead. Some of the people that were injured would volunteer and they would swim away from the group for the greater good. And then they would get attacked and they would get, limbs ripped off, torn in half, completely killed by these sharks. Some people, not everybody died of the shark attacks, right? Some of them came because of exposure. I mean, imagine you're just sitting there for days and days. You're getting burned. You don't have any food. You don't have any water. You don't really have anything to keep your body going other than your wits about you, right? Your sheer will to survive at this point. While they're in these groups of, once again, some people said it was up to 100, 150 people, they noticed that slowly but surely, when the sharks were coming, they would start to bump the side of people, give them a little nip, see what's going on, which the blood in the water compounded with all of the violence of this battleship being sunk, going down to the bottom of the ocean, combined with just the nature of when humans swim, we are not very gracious in the water. Sharks can pick up, it almost seems like we're flailing around. Like we are an injured animal already in the water. In the case of the U.S.S. Indianapolis, these people already were injured in the water. They can detect drops of blood from miles away. And like I said, it started the biggest feeding frenzy that really has ever happened to humans as we know it. So sitting in the middle of this Pacific Ocean, sharks are picking away people one at a time. You're starting to see someone that you may have known, that you may have served with. You see this person 2-3 days ago and everything was fine. You guys are sitting in the bunk next to each other reading books. Now you see this person's body floating up and down. And you're just praying that the guy that you were serving next to, you're praying that it's him, not you. Where it's going to come, these sharks are going to come and take you, right? Doesn't seem very ideal. There was even one report that some of the men that were on board were able to get a can of Spam before they went down. Here's my lovely plug for Spam. Buy Spam, eat Spam. It's not in these conditions, guys. Think about this. So they opened up the can of Spam, and that scent of meat started its own frenzy. And they all knew, no, we're not. It's not worth trying to eat a bite of Spam because of what's going to happen with these sharks that are going to be attacking. So by the time the 5th day came around, you had hundreds out of the initial 900, hundreds of them were at this point perished. Some people were said to be losing their minds where they would swim away from the group and they would swim back and they would say, guys, what are you doing out here? The boat never even went down. I was just in the mess hall and I was just feeding my face. I was just eating food. They were starting to go delirious and lose their mind. Some of the guys that were sitting there floating were reported to have the life jacket around their neck and just say, it's not worth it. I don't want to worry every moment about what could be coming up from below us. And they would just let themselves go. Some of them would resort to drinking seawater because they were so dehydrated and so thirsty. But everybody knows if you drink seawater because of the salinity, it's only going to dehydrate you faster. And if you're drinking too much of it, not only are you going to get very sick, your body's going to start expelling all of the fluids. And what is it that also attracts sharks? It's not just blood, right? So when these guys are in the bathroom, basically in the middle of the ocean, they're just going, it's attracting more and more sharks to the feed. Very scary. Like I said, I was scared to be in the pool by myself, let alone being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, watching these guys next to me one by one just getting picked off. And maybe it wasn't even necessarily somebody just getting pulled under. Maybe it was they just took a nibble of someone's leg. Now you don't have a leg. Now the guy next to you doesn't have a leg. Completely frightening. So fifth day comes around, and there was actually it was just a routine flight that happened to see all of these men floating in the wreckage. And the person who was actually flying, let's see, his name was Lieutenant R. Adrian Marks. He disobeyed his orders completely. He was only supposed to report the situation. As soon as he reported, they said, you know what, just keep going. We'll send people right now, but you're not to land. So he disobeyed his orders, and he actually landed, and he was able to pick up the stragglers and the swimmers, the people that weren't in those groups that seemed the most vulnerable at the point. Because he had an amphibious airplane, he got to land, and then he picked as many people up as he could. And as soon as his plane was full, he would take off. So it's estimated that about 20% of the people surviving, he actually rescued when it was absolutely against the orders of what he was told. So eventually, rescue shows up, and they start to get these guys out of the water. So out of the 1,200 that started before the boat went down, the 900 that made it into the water, 321 people came out alive. 4 of them died shortly after coming out of the water. So you only have 317 men left. Now the question is, when you're looking at about 600 people in this shark-infested waters for 5 days, what percentage of these guys were done because of dehydration, because they couldn't swim, and how many were actually picked off by these sharks? Some estimates say there were up to 200 people in that 5-day span that were victims of shark attacks in these feeding frenzies that happened when the sun was coming down, when the sun's coming up in the morning. That's when sharks tend to be feeding. So you have very small percentage that survived. The U.S.S. Indianapolis is one of the biggest feeding frenzies we've ever heard of, right, in the U.S. This is humanity in general, I would say. So looking into it, you probably initially think, okay, well, if these sharks are going wild, it's probably going to be great whites. It's probably going to be, the big daddies, the big boys. Actually, it wasn't. What they were saying is most likely it's going to be the oceanic white tip, because they swim in ocean opens very freely. They're not necessarily hugging the coast of anything. And they're known to be big enough to attack people. Even though it's not incredibly common, they are known to. And especially when you have that many people in one area, when you have blood in the water, when you have all of the commotion that seems to be the dinner bell for the sharks. So one of the most interesting stories, I think, in terms of history of shark attacks and what had happened, I think in the movie Jaws, the character Quint did a fantastic job of piquing my interest about this story and made me want to learn a little bit more about what actually had happened. That was the U.S.S. Indianapolis. I'll say what's up to that. It's beautiful. So when we come back, I want to go a little bit into the attacks off the coast of New Jersey in the early 1900s, 1916, that loosely sparked the idea for the movie Jaws, because this is something that I found fascinating. We'll come back to that. I'll say what's up to that. We'll be back momentarily. Thank you. All right, welcome back. So now we have the distinct pleasure of discussing what I think is one of the most interesting chains of events in shark attack history. That also was one of the stories that was the catalyst for Jaws having been made. So what I want to do is I want to go over each of these events in chronological order. So July 1st, 1916 to July 12th, 1916 was a series of, I almost said series of unfortunate events, but I don't think unfortunate is necessarily what you would, well, of course, it's obviously unfortunate, but it led to the loss of 4 lives and the injury of 1 other person in a matter of days. So during this time span, there have been debates for years over what type of shark or sharks may have done this. Some people theorize it was one shark that was just on, it was out for blood. It was just on a hunt for people. You can't you can't satiate the need for human blood and human flesh. Some people say it was multiple different sharks and the timing was just odd. I'll leave that up to you. You can decide. But once all of these events had transpired, it actually spawned a shark hunting frenzy off the coast of New Jersey in 1916. And in fact, through the frenzy of people trying to capture shark or sharks that may have caused these things to happen, I think they said 4 or 5 people were seriously injured. So it was almost like we did more damage to ourselves than the shark did, potentially. Well, what are you going to do? But in 1916, very little was known about sharks. So we didn't necessarily think in the moment that, hey, this is a man-eater that's out to get us, until you had a little bit more solid evidence with somebody seeing this shark. So, like I said, I'll go in chronological order. I'm going to break down each event as it had happened. So the first event, like I said, the first attack was July 1st, 1916, and it was in a town called Beach Haven, New Jersey. So it's just north of where Atlantic City is. So there's a gentleman named Charles Van Sant from Philadelphia, was on vacation with his family. He's 23-year-old at the time. So as soon as his family gets there, they decide to unload the car. And before dinner, he says, it's a beautiful day. Let's go for a swim. So he takes his trusty dog, and they go out to a beach where they have a lifeguard on duty and a couple people hanging around shore. He's playing with his dog, and then he says, I'm going to hop in. So he swims about 50 feet out. And after a few minutes, the lifeguard notices some kind of ruffling around in the water. What's going on? What's going on? This is different than when he was just swimming, because he was known to be a somewhat strong swimmer. And then he noticed the screams and the yells. And initially, the lifeguard, his name was Alexander Ott, he had thought that it was Charles Van Sant calling for his dog to come out. But then when he realized that wasn't him calling for his dog, that was him calling for help. Any help, save me. Blood-curdling screams and yells, blood in the water. The lifeguard, Alexander Ott, hopped in immediately. And I'll tell you that lifeguard he did his duty, let's say that. He had more stones than I think most of us would, considering you see someone out 50 feet into the water in the ocean that's deep at this point, swimming around in a pool of blood, flailing. You have no idea what's out there. But he went and he did his job. And he grabbed Charles Van Sant and he pulled him on in. And by the time that they had gotten into the beach, there was a massive gash torn open on Charles Van Sant's left hip. And there they dragged him from the beach up to the hotel, the nearest hotel. By 6:45 that night, he had bled out and he was gone. So one of the reports from the looky-loos on the beach, I guess you would say, reported that actually when Alexander Ott went as the lifeguard to go get Charles Van Sant, who was being attacked, and he grabbed him and he was swimming in, one of the reports was whatever shark was out there was actually trailing them in their trail of blood, as if they would have stopped swimming for one moment, maybe the shark would have gone in for seconds and maybe would have attacked Alexander Ott as well. But he didn't stop swimming from the time he had him. He kept going and going and going. Man, so that is the first event that happened July 1st, 1916. So over the next few days, there had been reports up and down the area of these boats saying we're seeing these abnormally large sharks that we're not used to seeing this time of year. So let's fast forward from the 1st to the 6th of July, 1916. Now, this is going to be a little bit farther north of Beach Haven in a city called, here we go, it's called Spring Lake. Once again, it's going to be a vacation town right off the coast of New Jersey. There's a gentleman named Charles Bruder he's from Switzerland, and he's actually there for the summer to enjoy the weather, to enjoy swimming, but he's also playing kind of the head of the bellhops of one of the, I think it's called the Essex Hotel, which is going to be right there in Spring Lake. And he decided one evening, similar story, let's go for a swim. So he was there with his wife, and his wife was staying while he was working. And this report, actually, he wasn't so close to the beach this time. He was a bit farther out. I think they said a little over 100 meters. So he's about 300 feet or so, 120 meters, 300 feet off the shore. So he's pretty deep. He's pretty far out there. And it, like I said, similar story. You hear screaming and yelling. You see the blood surrounding this person. In all of the water, the blood's turning red, blood red. And he's being attacked by a shark. So the two lifeguards that are on duty, you have Chris Anderson and George White. They grabbed their boat and they rowed out immediately as soon as they possibly could to go try to get Charles Bruder out of the water. They pull him on board. And then what they had discovered was this was a much more gruesome attack than the first. This wasn't just a gash on the side of the leg that caused him to bleed out. This was, his abdomen was ripped open and both of his legs severed. So this was much more violent than the first attack. By the time they even get back to the beach, he was already claimed dead because of blood loss. Oof. Now let's fast forward even further. So that was the 6th of July where Charles Bruder was attacked. Let's go all the way up to July 12th. And this is the day that kind of throws a wrench into the whole thought of maybe there's just a shark going up and down the shore attacking people. This is where it makes you think a little bit about what really did happen. And was it the same shark? Was it multiple sharks? Was it just a coincidence with timing and location? I don't know. So the 12th of July, there's an area called Matawan Creek, if you'll please excuse me, Matawan Creek. So this is about 30 miles north of where that last attack had just occurred. So there's a bay called Raritan Bay. So Matawan Creek is actually a bit inland. So it's going to be not on the ocean, not in the bay. This is going to be up a creek pretty far in fresh water. So on the 12th of July, there's a gentleman named Thomas Cottrell, who's a local sea captain. He lives in Matawan Creek, and he actually says, hey, don't go in the water. I spotted a shark about 10 feet long. Don't suggest you get in the water. Don't do it. What do these people do? Right? So how many times are they reporting sharks and people are just ignoring it? Knowing full well that within the last week and a half, there have been 2 fatal attacks, brutal fatal attacks right up and down the coast. But maybe they were lulled into a very false sense of security knowing that it's fresh water. They're in a creek. But when he says, no, there's a shark coming up the creek, don't go in the water. What do these people do? They get in the water. So it's a group of 6 boys that decided to go play in the creek. One of them was named Lester Stillwell. He was 11 years old at the time. So him and his buddies, they all hop in the creek. They're swimming around, no harm, no foul. Everything's fine. And then one of the boys looks over and he sees what he thought initially was just a plank of wood. Turned out to be a dorsal fin of a shark. So the big fin on the back of the shark that you see the classic in the movies. When it's trailing, you see the fin pop above the water, slowly but surely coming at you to your certain death. So they see that and all the boys start to swim out. They freak out and they're saying, let's get out of the water immediately out. But unfortunately, Lester Stillwell, 11 years old, was not fast enough in the water and he was pulled under. So as the other boys are getting out of the water, screaming and yelling, as you can imagine, help, help, anybody come help, while Lester is being attacked. So then you have a gentleman named Watson Stanley, who's 24 years old, also a resident of Matawan Creek. He hears this commotion. He comes. He doesn't know what's going on. You don't think there's going to be a shark a few miles in. You don't know exactly what's up. So he says, I'm going to go. I'll help this kid. Maybe he hit his head. Maybe the boys were playing too hard. He hit his head on a rock. Maybe he's having a seizure. Maybe he has leg cramps. Who knows? Watson Stanley dives in to save the young Lester Stillwell, who's actively being attacked. And then the shark turns on Watson Stanley and also attacks him. And unfortunately, in that scenario, both 11-year-old Lester Stillwell, 24-year-old Watson Stanley did lose their lives. So that's 4 deaths in total. So they were able to get Watson Stanley to the hospital before he bled out. And they didn't find Lester Stillwell's body until 2 days later, on the 14th of July, 1916, in that same creek. And it was reported shark attack. It was ripped up into pieces. Now, this is also where it continues to unfold a little bit. The fifth person to be attacked in this stretch, fortunately, did survive. But there was a gentleman named Joseph Dunn, 14 years old at the time, only half a mile away from Matawan Creek. 30 minutes later, he was swimming with his brother, and his brother noticed he was flailing around and there was blood. Once again, similar story. You've heard it before, but this time his brother almost got into a match of what they defined as a tug of war, shark versus human, for Joseph Dunn life. And the only reason I can laugh at that is because he did survive. So if you got a problem with that, suck it. So he did survive. So that was 5 attacks, 4 deaths in a stretch of 12 days. Now, was it the same shark that was out for blood, had a bloodlust, wanted to eat as many people as possible? Or was it different sharks with just odd timing? Now, this is where it gets a little bit muddled and nobody is for sure. Because in that frenzy that I had mentioned of people out to go hunt these sharks, there was a small great white. When I say small, of course, I mean small comparatively to a huge great white that's 20 feet long. But they did catch a great white. And when they opened it up, they did find human remains in its stomach. Now, knowing everything we know now, it was initially attributed to the great white shark that did all of those attacks. But we know great whites do not go into, they don't tend to anyway, go up into fresh water. One shark that we do know that goes into fresh water that is a very aggressive, it's called the bull shark. Bull sharks have been found 1,000 miles inland up in Illinois before in the early 1900s. So was it the same shark that did all of the attacks? Maybe it was a coincidence. Like I said, I'll leave that for you to decide. But those are the attacks of the summer of 1916 off the coast of New Jersey. Whew. I'll say what's up to that. We'll be back. Then let's get a little fun with this. Let's get a little bit more light. I just want to rattle off some really fun facts about some fun sharks. I should have come up with something a little better than that. Some sensational statistics of certain sharks. Anyways, I'll be back. I'll say what's up to that. Here we go. All right, welcome back. So now we have the, I suppose, final segment of the evening. And, the first 2 stories that we told tonight were a little bit rough because it was, one, the biggest shark feeding frenzy on humans that's recorded to humans. The other was a series of attacks that led to the writing and production of one of the most prolific and horrifying movie monsters in Jaws of all time. So at this point, I would like to take 3 different shark species that I have looked into now because of Jaws. So if you notice anything that's kind of the underlying common denominator here, it's the movie Jaws. It really did a lot to jog my brain and give me some great ideas to talk about. So one, obviously we have the great white shark, and I'll save best for last. Next, we just talked about the potential of a bull shark, so we'll talk about that guy. And there was a really fun scene in the movie. I had fun, dirty, grimy, gross scene in the movie Jaws where they think they caught the great white man killer, but they actually just caught a tiger shark off the coast. And they, Hooper cuts them open and they find, like I said, it's like a license plate from Louisiana. They find some fish in a can. So that's the tiger shark. So I want to talk a little bit about these. I'm going to rattle off some facts that are pretty fun. Then we'll wrap it up for the night. So let's do, I suppose we can just start with bull sharks. So bull sharks as I had mentioned, they can swim in fresh water. They've been found as far inland in North America as Illinois through different river inlet systems, 1,000 miles. You wouldn't think that a shark can really survive that long in fresh water, but lo and behold, it has been done. So they say thousands of miles upriver. I'll go with 1,000. We'll just call it that. They are known to hunt baby hippos and take over the occasional golf course that might be connected to the ocean. Okay, I'll have to look into that because that kind of, hold on, let me mark this down. Golf course, yet another reason not to go golfing. So bull sharks do have a very strong bite. So compared to a human, an adult human can bite down with a maximum of 1,300 newtons, which is going to be the unit of force. A full-grown bull shark, its jaw strength is just under 6,000 newtons. So quite impressive. So they are known to eat oysters, turtles, even other blue sharks. As I mentioned, they survive and they can even thrive in fresh water. It was Alton, Illinois in 1937 where the fishermen actually caught a bull shark. So, you're looking pretty far inland, not necessarily on the ocean. But there was one report, which it seems that the details are a little sketchy here, that they did find a bull shark in the Amazon River, 2,485 miles away from the ocean. Like I said, I'm going to say details are a little bit sketchy. A little sketchy there. So bull sharks actually can do well in aquariums. So if you have a big enough aquarium and they're going to be in a space that is conducive to their life, you can probably go see a bull shark if you have a large aquarium near you. So I know at the Oklahoma aquarium, they say right now, as of today, they have 10 bull sharks in a 500,000 gallon tank. So if you want to see what that's all about, there you go. Go check those out. So that's the bull shark. Very aggressive. And one of the rumors about the bull shark is that the testosterone levels on this creature are the highest of any animal that we know of in the animal kingdom. And that's probably the reason why they're so territorial, why they, in a moment's notice, can be docile and flip over to being incredibly aggressive. So there was one test that they had done where one of the male sharks that was tested had 358 nanograms of testosterone per milliliter. What does that mean? That was my question. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what that is compared to an adult. I'm going to assume that that's like crazy high. If anybody happens to know what that means, by all means, feel free to follow up. You can get me on Instagram. You can send me an email on Facebook. I'll go over that at the end. I don't know. So we'll look into that. So that's a bit about the bull shark. They can be up to 500 pounds, get up to 11 and a half feet in length. That's great. So the next that I think would be pretty fun to talk about, rattle off some stuff, is going to be about the tiger shark. So the tiger shark very much is known, and I learned this from the Jaws movie, and then I got it also confirmed when I was doing a little research here, as kind of the garbage disposal of the ocean. They've been known to eat sea snakes. They've been known to eat albatross. They've been known to eat man-made objects like paint cans and leather jackets. And in the occasion of Jaws, it was a nice Louisiana license plate that they found. They eat whole fish. So pretty much anything that's swimming around, they will hunt. And they are known to be a predator of the sea turtle, one of the only sharks that actually eats sea turtles. So they have a pretty broad diet, if you will. Very good. Not every tiger shark tends to have stripes. What they say is the younger the tiger shark, the more predominant the stripes are. As they get older, as they grow in length, the stripes on their back, why they're known as the tiger shark, they tend to mellow out where they almost blend in with the skin of the shark. So because of that, they're actually often confused with what's called a sand tiger shark, not just a tiger, sand tiger shark. So remember that one. They swim around in warm water, and their teeth have these notches. So when they do bite, they don't let go, it actually can pull you back in because the notch is kind of facing backwards. So once that thing bites you, man, you're going to be in for the long haul. Man, that's kind of wild. So the litters that tiger sharks do give when they give birth is not just one or two. They actually give birth to around 30 tiger sharks at once. So once they meet up and they get down, then you're going to see about 30 tiger sharks that are going to be coming out of mama potentially. And that's going to be 30 more tiger sharks that are going to be swimming in our oceans one day, hopefully. So they're very much like birds. They do migrate south for the winter. When it gets cold, they tend to go south. So that's why you hear, oh yeah, they're going to be in Louisiana, just like in Jaws. And that's why it maybe has that license plate. And then summertime, it's going to go back north. So that's a bit about the tiger sharks. But really, the most fun is going to be the great white shark. This is the big daddy of them all. They are huge. They have a very unique, almost torpedo shape with the tip of the snout. Because of that, they can swim up to 15 miles an hour. Crazy fast. When you think about Michael Phelps, what does that guy swim? Maybe 5 feet a second? That's nuts. So great whites have actually been spotted and recorded at times more than 20 feet long. In the movie Jaws, they say it's 25 feet. But man, imagine that. That thing is more half the size of a school bus, a yellow bus, not short bus, regular bus. More than half the size of that from the tip of the nose to the very end of its tail. Positively frightening. So more than half of the attacks that happen on humans every single year are actually attributed to the great white. Not necessarily because we have proof of that, but because that's what people say. What sounds more cool to you? Oh, I got bit in the leg by a lemon shark. Or no, I was swimming in the deeps and a great white shark came and got my leg. Right? So those details, like I said earlier, they can be a little bit sketchy. I don't know if I necessarily buy that, but that is what they say is reported. The heaviest great white shark ever found, 5,000 pounds, over 20 feet long. And this is millions and millions of years of the sharks being the apex predator, aside from killer whales. But you see these fantastic videos of these great white sharks that breach the water to get their prey. You know, it shows how they have learned over these millions of years the perfect strategies to hunting. So when we're in the water, we're out of our element. If one of these really does decide to come after you, let's get real. We don't stand a chance. The only reason people survive these attacks by these sharks is strictly because they're curious and they let us live. But with that said, I think we did a lot to talk about shark attacks tonight. We went over various different oceans, Pacific Ocean, we went to Atlantic Ocean. We kind of went all over, but the truth is we as humans are much more dangerous to sharks than they are to us. While you might hear about the occasional attack off the coast, the even more rare death of a human due to a shark, we are killing sharks in the numbers of hundreds of thousands a year. And I think if you are anything like me and you not only have, like I said, a fear of the deep, a fear of the water, you have to have a healthy respect for these predators that are in the ocean. When we go in the water to surf and to swim, we're going into their backyard. We have to respect that. We can't vilify these sharks for doing what they do and what they've done for millions of years. So, you know, when you hear about shark fin soup, they'll hunt these sharks and they'll net them. They'll bring them up onto their boat, cut the fins off, and then throw the shark back in while it's still alive, essentially condemning it to death because it can't swim. It just goes down to the bottom, sinks like a rock, and suffocates, if you will. You know, the overfishing it's astounding that we haven't done more to protect these creatures, because as scary as they may seem and as out of place as you may feel or I may feel while we're in the ocean, the truth of the matter is they're one of the most beautiful creatures that we have on planet Earth. And unless we go to great lengths in the damn near future to stop this overfishing, to change the way that we view and we think and interact with these animals, they might not be here for your kids or my kids, my grandkids. So think about that when you're thinking about these shark attacks and all the things that we went over, right? Interesting stories. Learn to have a great respect for them. Anyways, I think I'll say what's up to that. It's about that time. For any reason, if you want to reach out to me, you can email me. I'll say what's up to that at gmail.com. You can send me a message. Follow me on Instagram, ISWUTTPodcast. I have the same at Twitter, ISWUTTPodcast. Send me a message. Give me some suggestions. I'd love to hear what you want to hear for the next episodes. I had a great time doing this one. Great time doing some research. It was a heck of a lot of fun. I'll say what's up to that. Have a great night, folks.